All right, everyone. I know there might be some stragglers coming in here in the next couple minutes, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'd just like to welcome everyone for joining our session today. I know it's a busy time of year, and appreciate you finding some time to listen to Derek and myself today discuss VPN-Less access to SCADA systems. Just a couple of housekeeping. We are recording this session, so we will be sending out the session in the next 24 to 48 hours for you to have, just in case you miss anything. Also, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to drop them into the chat, and myself, Derek, or someone on our team will be able to assist you with answering those questions. So today, sorry. There we go. So today we're going to be covering, VPN-less access to SCADA systems. We're going to be talking about enhancing operational readiness with secure remote access, how traditional remote access tools fall short, and what's happening coming down the pipe in the future, and then the actual secure remote access without a VPN. So myself, my name is Bryan. I'm an account executive with Agilicus. I've been supporting municipalities and local governments for the last 7 years on their cybersecurity strategy and how to improve their security posture. And then I'd like to welcome Derek Smith. Appreciate you coming and joining me today. Derek's from Signature Automation. He's a senior automation manager. Derek, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, that would cover it. My name is Derek Smith. I've been working with Signature Automation, helping support municipalities. I've been in the automation industry for about 15 years now, and been supporting water and wastewater industries for the past 2.5 years now.
Great. Well, I appreciate you joining me today, Derek, and listen to all about your expertise and see if we can give some value to the folks that joined today. Just a little high overview about Agilicus. We're an all-in-one zero trust network access platform. So we provide secure access to critical systems and operational technology resources. While doing so, we're enhancing security and provide frictionless access without a VPN or a client or any network configurations or changes that need to be added. But I'm going to sit back for a little bit here. I'm going to let Derek take the reins for a bit and hear him talk about a little bit about himself and what he does at Signature Automation.
Sure. Sorry, I got myself on mute. Hi, my name is Derek Smith. Again, I work with Signature Automation. We are a Texas-based consulting and SCADA services company. We support primarily water and wastewater. We also do some corrections as well. We are highly involved in the OT and IT consulting and network design for municipalities. One of the things that we talk about with our clients is about the need for remote connectivity to the water facilities. There's a growing need within our municipalities for a remote connectivity to the systems for many different reasons. For example, the remote monitoring of sites, both manned and unmanned. A number of places are remote, very remote places, and hard to get to. So having that remote connectivity to the sites will allow you access to that real-time data. Also, once you have that data, there's many different things you could do with it. For example, at wastewater plants, there's analysis that can be done to say whether or not how much chemical you're using, whether or not it's too much or too little, where's the best place to put it. There could be early warnings for health, and then also if there's issues, it allows real-time data access for, say, operations managers who may not be on site at the time, or the city utility managers. Unfortunately, one of the downsides to this or need for remote access is the ability to have it securely. Without having a secure remote access, it increases the opportunity for bad actors to compromise the water or wastewater utility systems that we've seen a number of incidents over the past few years from that particular instance. So I want to talk a little bit about how we have traditionally gone about installing this remote access. Today, by far and large, the standard approach to it is to have a virtual private network, or VPN. These VPNs operate on a principle of trusting whoever gains access to the network, and then once they're inside, allow them free reign into that system. The analogy that has been explained to me that I think works best is to treat your city network as a castle, and then there's a gatekeeper. Once you have gotten past the gatekeeper, you can go anywhere in the castle you want, and there's nobody monitoring you. There's nobody verifying that you are where you should be. You have been trusted and gained access to the network. And these users, once they have access to the system, were as if they were directly plugged into the local network. And that's all well and good, but there are some risks that come from this. First off, managing those credentials is a real pain. We find many different instances where people have been let go or have left the city for many different reasons, and they still have access to that network. The credentials had not been properly managed. Or there's people that reuse the same passwords over and over again, and those passwords can be compromised, and people who are not that person can act like that person and get access to the system. That's one way we also see people have gained access into the networks. Also, they don't provide a granular access to specific resources. By that, what I mean is, if you only want people to access, for example, an HMI software, it's very difficult to do that with a VPN, to limit that access only to that one portion. So again, once you're inside the network, you can go anywhere, and there's little to no active monitoring of the activities of this user. So if somebody does something that's unwanted or untoward, you really have no real way of understanding, hey, this particular person did this activity, which makes it very difficult for threat detection. So what we're seeing actually is kind of the future of where municipalities we believe are going. First, it starts with the federal level in this case. In May of last year, the White House issued an executive order 14028 on improving the national cybersecurity, mandating that all the federal agencies and the people that work with the suppliers that work with the federal agencies move towards implementing this zero trust network architecture. We're also seeing the state level. In Texas, we passed Senate Bill 475, which, while it doesn't explicitly say zero trust architecture, what they're describing is zero trust architecture. And it's only a matter of time before we start seeing those requirements get pushed down to the municipal levels. And so the underlying threats and drawbacks of VPNs, those aren't going away. They're known now. We know how to manage them. But really, the best step forward is actually moving towards the zero trust network architecture. With that, I'll turn it back over to Bryan.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate that. Yeah, just obviously, thanks for sharing. Obviously, people know what traditional use of VPN is and how it traditionally connected to these devices. Obviously, with critical infrastructure, it's something that it can be dangerous at times if anything has happened to it, if it's breached. So we're talking about securing that access today without a VPN. But just a couple questions for you. With you dealing with your clients daily, what would you say the biggest gaps are in seeing how remote access is currently achieved?
Quite honestly, the biggest gap is just understanding of the vulnerabilities of VPNs. Most of the time, we see our municipalities implement a kill switch, a physical device that'll disconnect the network from the outside world. So while they have a VPN, they also have that second layer of a physical kill switch. But that in many ways defeats the desire for the remote connectivity that a lot of places want. Places that have remote sites, remote pump stations, and they want to be able to see the information coming from them. It's difficult to have that, or requires somebody to have that access to that kill switch before you can actually access the system. And some places they're behind locked doors, and only certain people have those access to those locked doors, and you have to call somebody in to be able to enable remote access, which again kind of defeats some of the benefits of having that remote access.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's an off switch or if you have no connectivity at all, you're going to have to actually go to that remote site, right? Depending on how far away out of town it is, not knowing exactly what's happening within that building or within that station prior to going out there as well. So,
if I could add one onto that, I know many plant managers that I've dealt with that are generally the plant managers the one to have access to their networks or control access to their networks. I know several that live, because these plants tend to be quite rural, live almost an hour away. Well, if they had access to that connectivity in that 1 hour, they could prevent, for example, a small situation escalating to a more serious escalation.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Have you and your customers previously struggled with security controls like MFA, auditing, privileges? If so, what kind of steps have you used to overcome those? Have you been able to overcome them? What kind of percentage of your clients are using, multi-factor authentication, have auditability, allow those privileges?
No, sure. The auditability is we can improve as an industry. We can be better about that. There's a more, how should I say this? We would like to see a larger percentage of people using multi-factor authentication. Unfortunately, that management of those credentials tends to be somewhat cumbersome for people, and the municipalities don't always want to manage it. So oftentimes it's not uncommon for us to see kind of a common login for municipalities.
Right. And just lastly, before I dive into what we do here, what would be the biggest challenges that you and your clients see moving with digital transformation into the zero trust world, and moving on from those traditional ways?
For me, the biggest challenge is actually, I think the path forward is pretty straightforward as far as understanding, because we're not dealing with additional hardware that has to be procured. It's a piece of software that that's installed on the network, and in that case, the cost of entry is relatively low. It's just becoming an education at that point about good cybersecurity practices and making sure that you have a good policy for managing the access to the network, which quite honestly, we should be doing that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, as you mentioned, with the executive orders, this education is coming out from, federal governments, and as you said, it's going to start trickling down to state, provincial, local government, municipal, eventually. So I think you're bang on in regard to, the education. Everything's kind of set already, but it's just trying to understand it further, and hopefully we can bring some light to that today. So I'm gonna just dive in a little bit on my side of things. If I sorry, just have to. So exactly that. What is zero trust? So zero trust by definition is always verify security framework where no attempt of access is trusted by default. So basically, just because you're in my building with a local IP doesn't mean you should be trusted to access everything. Under the zero trust security framework, organizations can micro-segment their networks and resources instead of allowing access to broad scope of systems. Your users are paired only with the resources that they need. Systems and services are isolated, and this significantly reduces blast radius in the case of an attack. So that's by definition what zero trust is. The way that we handle zero trust, or that we see it in our model, is it's the who, the what, and the how. So the who, every company has their identity providers, their Azure, their Google, their Apple. So basically, we don't believe into introducing any new usernames or passwords. You actually have everything invested in your organization already with your providers. We're leveraging that relationship with those providers to attest who you are and authenticate who you are. And then at that point, you're going to get authorization. So the authorization piece is the what. What are you allowing people to access? What kind of privilege are you doing? Are you doing read write, read only? Are you giving them an ownership? And you're going to have a full audit of everything that anyone does within those systems. So you're actually giving permission to resources themselves within your organization, not like a VPN as you're giving to the whole network. And then the access. How are you giving this access? So basically, segmenting those resources within your network and being able to just allow that access directly to your user from the resource. So I'm gonna just go down here. So as Derek mentioned earlier, the U.S. government has invested heavily into the space of the zero trust architecture. NIST, also known as the National Institute of Standards and Technology, in 2019 published their first set of standards for zero trust, going from the federal government, the military, local government, banks, pretty much any vertical. They have a standard for everyone. Same thing happening in Canada, recommending zero trust for critical infrastructure. Just because the legacy applications and the way that this has always worked in the past, people have always needed access, and we still understand that, and people need access to be able to control these systems. But there needs to be secure access. There needs to be accountability in regard to, are you enforcing multi-factor authentication? Do you have audit trails of this? Is it secure access? And are you isolating and micro-segmenting those resources within your system? So, as I mentioned, the governments in North America are both investing heavily in this, and it's going to trickle down to local governments, to municipalities. But definitely, there's standards set up. CISA has standards on how you can comply to moving forward with zero trust. I know Derek mentioned. It doesn't exactly say zero trust, but the way that I explain it is basically the bottom line of what zero trust is. So I know Derek had a similar slide here. I just would like to talk a little bit more about it. A VPN is more like an on and off switch. You're being let inside a building without a pass. You might only supposed to be in one area, but really everything else is available to you. It's basically like a long Ethernet cord. So when things like share credentials or compromised credentials, malware, once that's actually inside, there's nothing a VPN can do about it. So our goal is to basically air gap your network so there's no east-west movement between resources. I know in this one, this would be a corporate IT network that would have access to the SCADA systems, and you obviously would like to keep those segregated. But you want to really make sure that those are micro-segmented and make sure you know exactly who's accessing what when, and making sure that the blast radius is significantly reduced if anything were to ever happen. And a lot of bad actors out there. There's nothing really a VPN can do once a bad actor is able to get in through that network through the VPN. So as we talk about critical infrastructure and SCADA systems, what are the challenges that we've seen? Legacy applications, these systems always have to be turned on, always on connections required. Alternative, like Derek said, an on-off switch, there's no connection at all. You're gonna have to go to a remote site. Typically, you're not able to have multi-factor authentication because sometimes you actually only have one username that's always signed into that computer. Or otherwise you have shared credentials. Obviously, like I said, it's just the way that these legacy systems have worked for a long time. But now there's actually a way to be able to secure the access to these systems in a way where you can add the multi-factor, you can have the auditing, and you're ensuring that your network's segmented and third parties or users are only accessing the systems that they need to access. So the workflow that we do here at Agilicus, it's the who, the what, and the how, which makes up the zero trust. So the who, the identity, who are you? We don't believe in creating those new credentials, especially with third parties. We allow your users and your partners to identify themselves through Azure, Google, Apple, many other OpenID providers to authorize exactly who you are. You're not actually sacrificing any security on that. You're leveraging those investments of you and your company to make sure that those people are who they are. With another layer of security, we're actually able to offer multi-factor on top of that. So I know your organization might have a strategy where your internal users have multi-factor. You have a third party. You're not really sure what their strategy is on security. So you want to implement another multi-factor authentication for that third-party user. So you can do that here. But with leveraging these providers to authenticate who they are, you can control what they have access to. And basically, it's a multi-tenant authorization. So that's what's happening here. And then we go to the what. So this is the centralized authorization management side of things. So this is where you're going to be able to control who has access to what, all your rules and read-write, read-only, and having full auditability to who's accessing what. A VPN brings you into one spot. In a sense, it's on-off, but it's all the way through. So this actually allows you to set the controls of your users and all the permissions to allow them to exactly what they need access to within your network.
If I could add one more thing to it, that auditability that you mentioned, that's actually a big portion of the requirements of going forward, is having that auditability trail, which you didn't have with VPNs.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's exactly that. And I mean, once you get into shared credentials, it's a third parties there. As you mentioned, someone's at a company. How do you know that they don't work there anymore? What kind of access do they still have to your network? This allows granularity auditing in regard to what user exactly had access to what systems. So if anything went wrong, you can kind of go back, see exactly what happened. So that you're bang on. They never really had this opportunity before to have this. So it's a great thing moving forward to be able to see the visibility of who's accessing your resources, especially when you're dealing with third parties and vendors. And then the how. So basically, what we use at Agilicus is an identity-aware web application firewall. The proxy that receives the outbound-only connectivity helps people with the access. There's no configuration needed on your firewall. We run through port 443 with an outbound-only traffic to allow that direct access with the people who have permission to access that resource. So the connection actually only exists once the person's authenticated. So there's actually no tunnel prior to that. If you think about a VPN, you can actually arrive at the front gate of a portal and the network's behind it. So that has the ability to exploit that from a bad actor and get in, and then they're into your network. With us, we're actually just pairing that one resource with that user. So as I mentioned earlier, the risk of the blast radius is significantly reduced. This connector can live on a workstation, a VM, a router, a switch. We have clients that deploy this on Raspberry Pis, so remote sites that you had no connectivity before. We're allowing that connectivity and allowing that secure access to that resource. So that's how the workflow works of what we do as Agilicus. Zero Trust seems complicated. It seems like a daunting task to kind of bring it on and roll it out within your organization. But when it boils down to it, it's the who, the what, and the how. If the who, the what, and the how are individually set up for each resource and user pair, then you basically have Zero Trust. So, you spend all this money on Azure or Google or Apple, all your identity providers, to be able to help you with these things. We're not trying to make you buy new hardware and things like that. You actually have everything in place right now, but it's basically allowing yourselves to segment your networks, allowing the access with multi-factor authentication, with full auditing, to user resource pairing. And I think that's the biggest thing. The VPN's a user network pairing, and then what we do is user resource pairing.
And just one more question about the Agilicus connector. You can actually limit to specific applications as to which applications users have. For example, you allow myself access to the SCADA system on your slide, but I don't need access to the TCQ reporting, for example, or some other thing like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how it works is you would actually, if Derek, you actually only needed access to that one SCADA system or that one HMI, you would only see that on your platform. You wouldn't have access or be able to see anything else that might be within that network, because we're actually just isolating that one resource, whether it's an application, an RDP. We can actually do singular applications within an RDP. So like a notepad, you can just allow access to a notepad within an RDP session. So yeah, it's very granular. We are pairing resources with exactly just a user, so it's not like you're getting full access to a network.
So rather than like a team viewer approach, which is actually very much like a VPN type access into that desktop, you're only allowing specific access.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, we've had many clients that we work with. Historically have used TeamViewer when we've been able to kind of come in there and allow just that granular specific access to that individual resource for a user. As I mentioned, pairing users with specific resources. Those resources can be anything from HMI to RDP, remote desktop, VNC, shares, SSH, web applications, thick clients. We're able to pair those with individuals. So with allowing the authentication, we're going to be able to give permission to individual resources of what they have permission to access. So what do we solve with deployment here? So basically, you're allowing any user, third parties, internal users, contractors, to allow access to just granular systems. You're going to be able to enforce multi-factor authentication. You're going to have auditing. There's no new usernames or passwords. Fine-grained authorization, single sign-on, as well as you're going to be able to micro-segment your network. As mentioned, historically the VPN allows the full access to the network if it's breached. That's just not the case. It's just going to be the blast radius is going to be reduced. You're going to have simple, seamless, secure access across for all users, whether third parties, internal users, with minimal rollout efforts. As Derek mentioned, it's a small piece of software that actually gets installed within 10 minutes or so, and then you would pair your resources to that connector. So it's not like it's a daunting task to roll out. You actually have everything that you need right now to be successful with Zero Trust, but just allowing to move yourself to move forward and looking down the pipeline. The government's invested heavily into Zero Trust. This is what's going to be happening down the road. So definitely something that it doesn't need to be a make-work project, but it's going to significantly increase your security within your critical infrastructure systems. So I might just, Derek and I might just have a little bit of a chat here. I know there's some questions happening. I see Don's answering some of them for us. But Derek, I know you've been working with Signature Automation for about 15 years. How has Zero Trust changed the way that you and the team approach IT security and critical infrastructure and engineering technology? I know it's a newer thought process, but how are you approaching clients, and how are you having these tough discussions?
So let me back up a little bit. We've traditionally kind of worked in the traditional OT space, the view of network architecture like the Purdue model. But what we've seen over the past number of years is the rise of the Internet of Things, where individual components want to be connected to the internet and have that access, or a third-party vendor might want to access to, say, a flow computer so they could update the firmware periodically or view information coming off of that. And that's where it's the Purdue model is always broken down. You have items down at the lower level of the network that need access to the higher to the internet, and the ability from third parties to do that. Really, this to me is the way forward. We haven't seen as much implementation as we like in this. It's fairly new for our industry. It's fairly new, but I see it as a solution going forward for how do we solve some of the challenges that come for things like the rise of the Internet of Things, and also secure management of access to very specific parts of the network that the people that need access to.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I know these conversations are just starting probably in the last 6 months to 12 months. So it's really going to be interesting how things adopt going forward, because the more investments into critical infrastructure, the importance of it, your citizens' lives, things like that are all responsible for a lot of things in critical infrastructure. So, hopefully the education and the investments that governments are doing trickle down to the local government, and you're able to be able to segment these networks and approach it that way.
That's right. Give the overall picture we want to give here is like you want to give only the access this person needs, or this company needs to that specific resource, and not expose the rest of your network to the outside. Because quite honestly, what we've seen in the past is third-party vendors would actually come through and install a wireless NIC card. You come and find out what you've been exposed to the internet because somebody had trouble getting access through a VPN or something like that. And as you said, with the way that the Zero Trust network architecture works, you have the single sign-on that's provided by your companies. For example, I live in Dallas, so I'm just going to pick on the city of Dallas. It'd be Joe User at cityofdallas.com. The city of Dallas already authenticates them. You're just allowing that person from City of Dallas access to that area.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what you mean by they already have the steps that need in order to be able to enable Zero Trust architecture. They already have a lot of the groundwork that they need for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like when you're rolling out a new VPN or different projects that that IT and OT are working on. It's not like a 5-month rollout or 8-month rollout, things like that. It can be accomplished fairly quickly and fairly reasonable cost effectively as well. I just sorry, I see Don answering some questions for me, so I appreciate that, Don. I know we touched on it a little bit. Just a last note here, but what are your predictions for 2023 and enabling this remote access? Do you see it's in attending events and things like that in your industry? Is it being talked about more? Are clients coming to you talking about Zero Trust at all?
To be honest with you, they haven't talked. I haven't had this many conversations with clients coming to me as of yet. It's upon us as solution providers to go and say, look, hey, you really need to do your homework on this, because we know that this is the way that you're headed. You see these things trickle down from the federal level down to the state level. It's only a matter of time before you see it at the municipal level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time today, Derek. I might just leave the viewers with this. What we covered was traditional VPNs and how they're falling short. The security gaps with them. Obviously, the government's investing a lot of money within the critical infrastructure and Zero Trust world. What's holding you back from moving forward with Zero Trust is what I might, challenge you a little bit as a viewer. But if you're interested in having a technical demo, finding out whether your network is air gapped, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you. I'd be happy to facilitate a call with my technical team to go over kind of how we're able to do it. I know we did the high level overview here, but really happy to go over it with my team and your technical team to discuss and what your environment looks like and how we can help with tightening that gap up. But Derek, I do really appreciate you joining me today. Yeah, good luck moving forward with the clients, and I'm sure we'll be in discussion in the next little bit here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. This is a conversation we'll be having more and more often, and I'm glad to have these conversations with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So feel free to reach out to Derek or myself if you have any further questions. Happy to set up a call, set up a demo, or just continue the conversations and discuss kind of what's happening in your environment. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a recording of the session in the next 24 to 48 hours. That'll be going out. But yeah, if any questions pop up, feel free to reach out, and happy to chat with you. Thanks for coming, everyone.